The Woman in the Window is a psychological thriller directed by Joe Wright, and Tracy Letts did the screenplay. It's based on a few things. So it's supposed to be more so based on the novel by A.J. Finn, a 2018 novel. But there is also The Woman in the Window, the 1944 Fritz Lang film, which itself was adapted from a novel as well. And so there's a lot of women, there's a lot of windows. And I was actually kind of revisiting the 1944 film myself pretty recent last night after I watched Woman in the Window. And there's a few connective tissues, but not much, which I guess is why they're really not billing this in any way as a remake. It's not. Very different setup for the film, to be totally certain. But yeah, it just hit Netflix, and it's interesting because this movie, so Fox originally had this movie. They were going to, I think, adapt this novel like before it had even come out, because this was back in like 2016. So there's a whole story behind this movie where they shot it in 2018, so 3 years ago, and they had to do a bunch of reshoots. They did some rewrites. It got delayed to come out in 2019, and then you know what happens next. The Fox deal. No, I'm just kidding. But it really was supposed to be theatrically released by 20th Century Fox in 2019. At that point, because it was delayed after like Disney took over Fox, obviously, and they set a new release date for just like literally a year ago yesterday, May 15th, 2020. But then they took it off the calendar because of the whole pandemic. We always got to find a way to mention that every episode, but yeah, there you go.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's unavoidable.
Now we're getting this thing a year later because Netflix acquired the distribution rights just this past fall from, now it's called 20th Century Studios, which is why when you watch this movie on Netflix, it starts with the 20th Century Studios logo, which is pretty wild to me that I still can't get used to it. I don't know about you, but it's like 20th Century Studios, and you're like, man, they took out the Fox. But then the movie starts and it's like Fox 2000 presents. Yes. So I thought that was kind of
well, I mean, you're only mentioning like half the issues that the movie has gone through.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of glossing over a bunch of stuff.
I mean, it's worth mentioning that A.J. Finn, the author of the book, there's a pretty scandalous New Yorker article about him that came out either in 2018 or 2019 that, just pretty bluntly said that he's a serial fabulist, among other things. And that, it basically just spelled out that he uses book as a way to like kind of like push himself into like the like prestige drama category, or like whatever these like Gone Girl and like Girl on the Train, like these like pulpy thriller novels that got like these prestige dramas, and like there's obviously something kind of cynical about like his approach to it, to say the least.
To be clear, so what you're saying is, I don't know if people are like totally caught up, he made a bunch of stuff up about his life, is the short of it. Or he was accused of making things up, like saying that his mother suffered from cancer. And like lost her to a brain tumor. Yeah, and his brother, he claimed his brother committed suicide, all kinds of stuff. And he apparently didn't he take it all from a film literally called Copycat?
I think so, yeah. It's a wild article. I mean, very well written article, but it just like, man, I don't know. Like, if this is even half true, like this guy is but anyway.
I think he blamed it on his bipolar disorder.
Yeah. Which I mean, I'm not really, I'm just explaining the facts. Like, I don't really want to dive into it too much, truth be told. But
just saying, that's his defense.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. But also, this is, I think, possibly the last film they'll be credited to producer Scott Rudin, which is also kind of weird to see here, because he has been. I mean, it's been well known that he has been pretty well known as a serial abuser as well in his workplace. And now he's kind of getting repercussions to it, and his name has been pulled from a lot of upcoming films. But for a reason, it is on this film. So
I think that's a contractual thing, because I mean, this the whole thing with the Scott Rudin stuff coming out was just this past April, like a month ago. So I think like the way that movies work, like you just can't make a change like that without violating some sort of contract that quickly.
Yeah. And Yeah, like you said, it's the last Fox 2000 film, possibly the last Fox film. I don't even know at this point what's going on with Fox. And also, I think Tracy Letts and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who were previously going to do the score for this film, have both basically disowned it publicly, being like, this is not our vision. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor are just like, we pulled our score from this thing. So,
but then Danny Elfman was like, I can do it. I'll do it. I got it. This
Give
movie,
me 2 hours and 2 cups of coffee, and I'll put something together.
Yeah, exactly. This movie wants you to forget about Fox so much that it almost renamed its character, who is Dr. Anna Fox.
Yeah,
that was a bad joke.
Anna 20th Century Studios. Yeah. So anyway, my point is just that this movie has gone through the ringer, not only because of the pandemic, and I almost sort of feel bad for it at this point.
I guess. I mean, there's people in it who, like, there's great actors. I mean, this is one of those movies where you're watching it and you're like, who's next? Like, who are we going to see next? We have Amy Adams, of course, starring, but we also have Gary Oldman. We have Anthony Mackie. We have Wyatt Russell, Tyree Henry, and then Julianne Moore. Yeah. And then at one point, Jason Leigh just shows up. And I'm like, of course. Like, why not? And of course, Tracy Letts gets a fun little role since he is a producer and, he wrote the screenplay. I was thinking of how Tyler Perry was in Those Who Wish Me Dead and was a producer.
Yeah, he was pretty good in that. I forgot to mention that. I thought, I actually like him in like supporting actor mode.
Yeah, he's an imposing guy. He should be in roles like that more often. He's good at.
Yeah, I mean, But anyway, he's not in this film.
Yeah, we're squeezing a little extra part of that review. Yeah, Woman in the Window. So the story here, and like we said, borrowed quite a bit from Copycat and a lot of other things. I mean, that's the first thing you'll notice about this movie is like, I feel like I've seen this before, between its devotion to Rear Window, a lot of Hitchcock,
right? Spellbound,
Disturbia, it just goes on and on. But the setup is that we follow a child psychologist named Anna Fox, played by Amy Adams, who lives all by herself in an apartment in Manhattan. We quickly learn that she's separated from her husband, played by Anthony Mackie, and her daughter, Olivia. But she still talks to them basically every single day. She has something called agoraphobia, which means that she is unable to leave her house. She feels like she has to stay in there. And for that reason, she kind of spies on all of her neighbors from her window, hence Woman in the Window. And while she is observing a new family moving into the house across the street, she starts to maybe build a very strange, kind of tense sort of dynamic with this family as one by one, they each come to her apartment for a visit. And from there, things get a little strange, a little weird. So Gary Oldman plays the father figure of the family across the street. We also have Julianne Moore, who plays this woman named Jane Russell. And we also have a kid named Ethan, 15-year-old kid played by Fred Hechinger, who's the first one to come visit her, a teenager. And yeah, as the movie goes on, you can tell something is a little bit off. Amy Adams' character is on a lot of meds. She is having a little bit of difficulty with her tenant, David, played by Wyatt Russell, who lives in the basement. And at some point, she even tries to get the police to help her out. And one of the detectives, played by Tyree Henry, is just trying to kind of keep her subdued, trying to like help her maybe not keep doing all this spying, taking photos of her neighbors, that sort of thing. This is a movie with a lot of effort. Like, they tried with this, I think. Like, they really wanted to make a movie that was tense and dynamic and had a lot of characters that could be like a prestigious sort of noir film. I mean, naming something Woman in the Window certainly lends a lot to that, considering that the Fritz Lang film helped kind of create the noir genre. But I gotta say, it, for me, really difficult to get past how tropey and familiar and obvious this script is. I think a lot of people who've watched more than a few noir films are going to see a ton of stuff coming here. I mean, it's just too predictable. I haven't called the twist in an Amy Adams movie this quickly since Arrival, but that sounds a little braggy. Sorry. But yeah, Will, what did you think of The Woman in the Window?
Yeah, I mean, this is almost comically derivative of other films. To the point where I mean, I haven't read the book that it's based on, but if it is close to this, which I don't even know if it is, because as you were mentioning, it's gone through so many reshoots that I don't even know if this is a faithful adaptation of the book. It could just be, so hackneyed and Frankensteined at this point that it doesn't really resemble what was in the text. But the material itself just feels so boilerplate. Like, even by like throwaway paperback airplane novel standards, this feels like terribly predictable and derivative. But there is, like you said, like this kind of prestige sheen to it, where it has like all these big stars. Like, like there's a lot of visual flair to this in a way that I actually did kind of admire. I really actually did enjoy the cinematography from Bruno Denubal. I'm probably mispronouncing that, as I mispronounce most names. But
yeah, I think it's Bruno de Bonnell, but I'm not 100% sure myself.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like a lot of fun like blocking and staging here, like to the point where it kind of felt like, look, this movie is not gonna pick up. Let's just get really weird with the visuals, and like there's just like a big apple that floats on the screen, and then just like kind of weird blocking. A lot of like De Palma-esque blocking. Like that's actually, I felt I was thinking back on more of De Palma's stuff than I was Hitchcock, even when the movie was sort of hand-fisting Hitchcock stuff into the film. I just kept, especially because the movie has like this kind of like trashy thriller quality to it, that because the movie itself is so inconsistent in style, it almost seems to indulge in a weird way that I don't know. I didn't hate this film the way that some folks are. Like, some folks are really bringing their knives out for this film, and I guess I just found it to be so like I said, trashy and throwaway with these big name stars that I found it to be almost amusingly inert, but not in a terribly offensive way, with the exception maybe of there's one character in the film who is portrayed potentially as autistic that could be seen as offensive.
Yeah, it's funny you say amusingly inert too, because that's kind of how I felt about his last movie, Joe Wright, Darkest Hour. Because I thought, so he comes out with Pan in 2015, trying to kick off a franchise. Pan famously, at least infamously for me, it was just one of my least favorite movies of that. I just hated that movie. And I hated just how shamelessly pandering it was to trying to generate or regenerate an IP in one of the just most uninteresting ways.
I think I'm actually kind of in the same vein with that film as I am with this film, where like I agree with you, it's a bad film and it makes a lot of baffling decisions, but I was almost half amused by all the baffling decisions that it made, and that's kind of where I'm at with this film as well.
It's just weird because, like, I'm not the biggest fan of The Soloist, which he did in 2009, but I mean, after films like Hannah and Anna Karenina, and he, of course, did Pride and Prejudice, Atonement. I mean, we know this guy can make movies that at least satisfy critics and can get a lot of awards attention, right? And yeah, it's kind of baffling to me where his career has sort of gone at this point. I mean, we should say Darkest Hour did get a lot of awards buzz for Gary Oldman, obviously, and it got nominated. And didn't Gary Oldman actually, it got nominated for Best Picture, but didn't Gary Oldman also win the Oscar?
Yeah, he won for Best Actor.
Yeah.
More of a legacy Oscar,
right?
To be fair, but he did win.
He was up against Daniel Day-Lewis, and they were just like, he's got enough Oscars, and that's kind of the situation. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling about this movie, Woman in the Window, where I wish I saw them kind of going more full tilt into some genre unpredictability. I mean, it does it a little bit. There's like a car in a living room at one point where I was like, man, where's this movie? Like, this is the kind of movie I want to see, where they just kind of, I think though where the movie loses me is how it frames all of this stuff around mental health. This movie is about as precise and considerate with mental health issues as I guess you can reasonably expect from a Hollywood filmmaker. I just really just don't get the sense that Joe Wright and I hate to say it, but Tracy Letts, I feel like they're just trying to really heighten the mental health experience in a way that is just like, come on. Like, I just didn't buy it.
All right, I'll let Tracy Letts off the hook because, like I said, for one, I think that's the material, and two, I think that might be the reshoots. Sure. Like, I don't know like what the original version of this movie was, and like I said, Tracy Letts has basically said, "This is not my movie. Like, don't like whatever I did with this is not enough. What the studio wanted." So I'll let him off the hook just because like it seems like he made a more like subdued, thoughtful movie. That test audience are just like, why is nothing happening? Like, why are we? I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't actually know what happened with the test screenings, but from what I was told, audiences were confused about things, so they added a bunch of stuff they retested the film. It didn't get a better response, so Scott Rudin and his team were just like, screw it, just throw it out.
Yeah.
We this one got burnt in the oven. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't really know what the original version of this movie was. I'd be curious to see it, release the right cut. Why not? Just because I'm kind of curious
Let's cut
to know what the original version is. But like this movie feels like it's on like 1.5 speed the whole time. Like it feels like it's constantly like breathless, like trying to get everything out. And I have to assume that is because of the reshoots. Like they're just trying to jam so much information into this movie that it's almost kind of dizzying how much they're trying to do for a like almost 2-hour runtime. And I think that also kind of adds to the weirdness of it and like all the baffling decisions that it made, that like it's just constantly throwing things at you that like it's kind of hard to be bored by it because it's just constantly trying to like divert your attention or do visual tricks or like do all these different things in a hyper derivative narrative. But yeah, that doesn't make it a good film in the least.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I could see people watching this and, maybe they won't catch some of the big twists that, like if you've never seen like if you haven't seen a lot of these movies and you're just sort of like breezing Netflix and you like Amy Adams, sure, I could see people watching this, and like that's not to talk down to anybody whatsoever. It's just like, it's just is one of those films that punishes people who watch too many movies because it's just hard to get through it because you're like, when are you going to get to the part? We know this is about gaslighting. We know, and that is another thing. The gaslighting of this movie just feels a little bit like, I don't know. It rang very hollow to me what they're trying to say here about. We've seen a lot of movies kind of go down this road of like how mental health is in a way like used to like gaslit people, and I'm not saying movies like that shouldn't exist at all. Like not saying that whatsoever. Just that if you're gonna do it, I think you need to do it in a more interesting, kind of compelling, new way, not just sort of do what we've seen before.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing for me is that like the material based on how it's presented here feels super cynical in terms of just like trying to ride the coattails of other book success and other story success. And the movie almost feels a little cynical in the fact that it's trying to be a prestige drama for presumably award attention. But because it's gone through this whole rigmarole of reshoots and like people entering and leaving the project and stuff like that, that almost kind of regains its sort of like trashy B quality. Which is where I find the divide kind of fascinating for me, is that like by being worse, it almost becomes better, if that makes sense.
Almost. Yeah. And kind of, I can kind of see what you're saying there. Yeah, this has been a tough time for Amy Adams. I think she's still as talented as ever, but she's just picking projects like this. And I haven't seen Hillbilly Elegy, but based on what I know of that movie, just projects that don't really suit her talents. And, there was also Vice, I guess, which I just really didn't feel like she made much of an impression. I gotta say, I don't think I've really...
I thought she was all right.
Well, I think the last thing I saw her in that I thought I was really like hooked with her performance was probably Sharp Objects, the HBO miniseries, which...
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I heard it's good.
Movie-wise, yeah, I mean, we've gotten this and like, her Lois Lane thing and like the 2 rounds of Justice League we've gotten recently. So yeah, I just think that I'm hoping that Amy Adams is going to be part of some films that kind of harken back to, I think, her at her actual best as an actor.
I mean, I thought she was pretty good in Justice League, the Snyder cut, not the theatrical version. Like theatrical version, everyone was bad in that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you with Hillbilly Elegy. A pretty rare bad performance from Amy Adams, and it's like that was the type of performance where she clearly was trying, so it was just kind of embarrassing to watch her. This wasn't embarrassing to me. It was just like it felt like she was just kind of confused, like she didn't really know what to do, either because of the reshoots or like the character was just so thinly drawn out that she just couldn't really do much with it. That like she was like, I mean, it makes sense like why she joined the project, but like probably through the whole thing she could see it was falling apart, and she was just like, I'm just going to try to do my best to salvage this thing, and she couldn't, which I don't blame her for. But I do agree with you, it is a shame, especially for so many people who want Amy Adams to finally get that Oscar.
I know.
Not only to make a good film again, but actually finally get the critical acclaim that she deserves, and she's straddled by these lackluster projects that don't service her well.
Yeah, I think that really calls it. So I'm a C plus on this movie. I don't think it's terrible. I agree that I think, yeah, critics are really coming out for this one. And I think there's a lot to criticize, to be totally certain. But it is effective, and as derivative as it is, it's at least executing the sort of stuff you would expect in ways that actually mimic a decent movie. So it's not like you're going to... I don't think this is a slog to get through necessarily. In fact, there were some parts that I thought were actually in the territory of like, this is so schlocky. I can actually kind of just get into this, and it's on its own terms in a way. So not a waste of a total,
right.
This is such a Sunday matinee, curiosity satisfier. If you're really bored, it's that kind of movie for me.
Yeah, I think schlocky is probably the word I was searching for earlier because, like I said, like it went into this like trying to be sort of prestige and subdued, and because of all the reshoots and all this stuff, it became this kind of schlocky B movie by accident, I guess. Which I guess to me, like I said, it makes the movie worse, but at the same time, it also makes it a little bit more fun than I think it might have been otherwise. But like I said, I'd be curious to see what the original version of this movie was, just out of curiosity, because like clearly there's stuff in here that I think is good. Like I think the cinematography is good. I think Julianne Moore actually gives a pretty good performance here, and even like her scene with Amy Adams, where they're just like taking cat photos and drinking wine, is kind of it's fun the way it's supposed to be. And I kind of wish the movie had that energy throughout. It wasn't taking itself so seriously at other points. Like there's like you said, like there's times where it's like trying to mimic Rear Window and these other Hitchcock movies, and it's also trying to do like the De Palma thing, and is also trying to be a little bit more cerebral, almost in like a I'm thinking of ending things sort of way. And it's just like I think the movie's at its best when it's just kind of like leaning into its absurdity and goofy impulses and just being this kind of throwaway schlock movie that isn't good by design, but it's a little bit fun to watch on a Netflix Sunday afternoon. So I'll give it a sort of bemused C plus. Almost said B plus.
This thing is going places.
Yeah, like I said, it's not good. I don't know how you could really justify its quality, but considering what it's been through and everything that it has going against it, I'm kind of surprised it was actually pretty watchable and silly throughout. Like it definitely ended up better than I anticipated, but not really, I guess, in the way that it was intending to be better.
All right, well, that is a double C plus from us. This movie, like we've mentioned a couple times, critics ain't loving it. 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, the average rating is 4.9 out of 10. So it's one of those movies where I think people are rating it rotten, but they're not saying that it's like, oh my gosh, a 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. They're just kind of like mixed to negative, which I think I think that makes a lot of sense to me. This movie, another movie that's only 100 minutes long, the same exact runtime as Those Who Wish Me Dead. So your choice between Angelina Jolie and Amy Adams has gotten even more difficult. If we were even having difficulty deciding between which of these two movies to do first, we were like, well, let's look at the runtime, exactly the same, all that. But all right, that is The Woman in the Window. It is now able to stream on Netflix. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice, or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.